There's a moment in every wounded soul's life when silence screams louder than words. It's that cold, stifling silence you hear when the people you trusted most have turned their backs on you. It's the suffocating stillness after betrayal, the kind that doesn't just break your heart, it shatters the very foundation of who you thought you were. And in that moment, buried under the weight of rejection, dismissal, and the quiet pleasure others seem to take in your failure, you begin to wonder, am I truly alone? They didn't just walk away. No, that would have been mercy. Instead, they orchestrated your downfall piece by piece. Some with subtle words that disguised contempt as concern, others with open cruelty that smiled in your face and stabbed you the second you turned away. They made you feel small, insignificant, like your presence was a nuisance and your potential a threat. They watched you fall and felt relief. They watched you cry and felt power. They tried to bury you, not just your voice, but your identity, your dreams, your very sense of worth. But here's the truth, the part they never anticipated: you were not buried. You were planted. And in the darkness of that soil, in that place where no one came to check on you, where you wept alone, where you doubted everything, you began to change. Not loudly, not with dramatic speeches or outward rage. You changed quietly, like a fire that smolders beneath ash, waiting for the right wind to rise. You began to understand that your suffering was not your end. It was the beginning of something unshakable. There is a peculiar kind of transformation that only pain can bring. You stop seeking validation from the people who abandoned you. You stop chasing approval from those who once held your life in their hands like it was disposable. And you begin to recognize that the ones who tried to bury you were terrified of what you might become if you ever stood up again. So you rose, not to prove them wrong, but because staying down was no longer an option. And now you burn, not wildly, not recklessly, but with a fire that consumes everything false, everything weak, everything that once made you doubt your own strength. You became the very thing they feared, proof that you cannot destroy what is destined to rise. And here's the irony. While they sleep with smug satisfaction, thinking they've erased you from the equation, it's your name that echoes in their silence. It's your growth that haunts them. It's your fire that keeps them up at night. Why does your success disturb them so deeply? Why does your strength unsettle their comfort? Could it be that deep down they knew who you truly were all along? And that's what they tried to bury. Let's look at what really happens when someone dares to rise from the ashes and becomes the fire their enemies can't extinguish. This is not just about revenge. This is about transformation, evolution, and power reclaimed. Your silence became your strategy. They mocked you when you stopped responding, whispered about your distance, laughed at how quiet you'd become, as if your silence was proof that they had won. As if their betrayal had crushed you so deeply that you had nothing left to say. But what they never understood was that your silence wasn't your defeat. It was your strategy. You see, when you've been wounded deeply by people you trusted, by those you never thought would hurt you, you stop wasting words. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop defending your character to those who've already decided to assassinate it behind your back. There's a kind of wisdom that only pain can teach. And in that wisdom, silence becomes your shield. They thought you disappeared because you were weak, because you had no fight left in you. But the truth? You were retreating, not to give up, but to gather yourself, to bleed in private, to break in private, to rebuild in private. Because when the battlefield is full of traitors wearing the masks of friends, silence is the only safe ground left. There were nights when the silence screamed louder than any voice ever could. When you sat alone, wondering what you did to deserve the betrayal. When the people you stood up for were the same ones who walked away without a second thought. And in that raw loneliness, in that devastating stillness, something sacred began to grow. Something they never expected, your inner fire. Every tear you cried in silence watered the soil of your strength. Every unanswered question echoed inside you until it hardened into clarity. You stopped begging for closure from people who were never interested in your healing. You stopped needing apologies from mouths that never spoke truth. And you began to understand that silence wasn't emptiness, it was transformation. You see, silence is terrifying to those who operate in chaos. When you go quiet, they can no longer predict your next move. They can't control your narrative. They can't manipulate your emotions. And so they panic. They whisper even louder. They create stories to fill the void you left. But deep down, they know something has changed in you, something they can't reach anymore. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable your silence makes them now? The same people who dismissed you when you spoke are now unsettled when you say nothing, because silence speaks volumes, and yours is screaming one truth they can't escape. You don't need them anymore. They tried to define your silence as weakness, but what if your silence was the greatest declaration of strength you've ever made? What if not reacting, not engaging, not explaining was the moment you took your power back? While they sought attention, you built intention. While they played games, you studied every move. While they threw stones, you built walls of discernment. And in the shadows, you became something unstoppable. And now they don't know how to approach you, because the version of you that once craved their validation is gone. The one who tolerated disrespect no longer exists. You've become the storm they didn't see coming. All because you chose silence over chaos, growth over revenge, strategy over reaction. So the next time someone calls your silence weakness, remember this: seeds don't grow with noise. They grow in stillness, buried in darkness, far away from praise and applause. And you, my friend, have grown into something they can no longer manipulate, no longer diminish, no longer bury. Your silence didn't mean you gave up. It meant you were rising. Your rock bottom became sacred ground. They watched you fall, not with pity, not with concern, but with a quiet satisfaction that only betrayal can wear without shame. The same people you once stood up for, the ones you believed would never let you down, looked the other way when you were crumbling. And when you hit rock bottom, they didn't reach out to lift you. They stepped over you as if you never mattered. But here's what they didn't understand. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning. There's something strange about hitting the lowest point. Everything gets stripped away. The illusions, the noise, the false friendships, the empty affirmations. What remains is raw, aching truth. And while that truth hurts, it also heals. Because in that moment, when you have nothing left, you start to see what actually matters. You begin to find pieces of yourself that were buried under the expectations of others. You begin to breathe again, not the shallow breath of survival, but the deep, painful breath of awakening. They thought you were finished. They mistook your brokenness for defeat. But sometimes being broken is the only way the light can finally get in. What they saw as your destruction was actually your purification, that dark place you landed in, the one filled with loneliness, shame, confusion, and silence, became your sacred ground. That's where you learned to fight for yourself when no one else would. That's where your strength stopped being borrowed and became your own. That's where your identity stopped being built on approval and began to root in purpose. And while they laughed at your downfall, something they couldn't see began to grow beneath the surface. Something fierce, something resilient, something holy. You didn't rise with vengeance, you rose with vision. You didn't climb out to prove anything to them. You climbed out because your soul refused to die in a grave someone else dug for you. Your pain became your teacher. Your tears became your compass. And your scars? They became your testimony. Tell me, how many nights did you cry yourself to sleep, thinking it would never get better? How many mornings did you stare at the ceiling, wondering if you could face another day of pretending you were okay? And yet, look at you now. You're not who you were back then. You're not broken. You're rebuilt. And that ground you once cursed, that dark place that nearly swallowed you whole, it's sacred now, because that's where your soul met truth. That's where you finally stopped running, stopped performing, stopped pleasing, and faced everything. You stood naked in front of your pain and decided, I will not die here. They will never understand what it took to rise from that place. They'll never know the silent wars you fought, the inner demons you slayed, the voices you had to silence just to take another step forward. They'll never understand how the ground they thought would bury you became the very foundation that now carries your strength. Rock bottom didn't destroy you, it revealed you. And now every step you take is grounded in something real, something tested, something eternal. And no one can take that from you, not the ones who hurt you, not the ones who doubted you, not even the version of yourself who once believed you'd never get out of that pit. Because rock bottom, for you, wasn't the end. It was sacred. It was rebirth. It was where the fire began. They underestimated the power of your pain. They thought your pain would paralyze you, that it would keep you stuck in the same place, unable to breathe, unable to rise. They believed that after everything they did, after the lies, the manipulation, the abandonment, you'd stay broken. They mistook your tears for surrender. They saw your silence and assumed you had no more fight left in you, but they never realized the truth about pain. When it doesn't kill you, it remakes you. There is a kind of power that only emerges through suffering, a kind of strength that doesn't come from comfort or applause, but from enduring when no one else saw your struggle. And that's what they never understood. Your pain didn't break you, it forged you. Every sleepless night, every silent scream, every moment when your chest felt like it was caving in and your soul felt abandoned, those weren't signs of weakness. Those were the fires that burned off everything false. Your pain didn't make you bitter, it made you clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what matters, clear about who you will never be again. They looked at your pain like it was a wound, bleeding and vulnerable. But what they didn't see was that the wound was healing into armor. Every betrayal thickened your skin. Every rejection sharpened your intuition. Every moment of being used, overlooked, and disrespected added another layer to the strength you didn't even know you had. You didn't need revenge. Your healing was the revenge. They don't understand why you're different now, why you don't respond the same, why you don't chase, explain, or beg anymore. It's because pain taught you the difference between being needed and being used. Pain taught you that some people only love you as long as you stay small, silent, and easy to control. The moment you start to grow, they feel threatened. The moment you set boundaries, they feel insulted. But it's not your job to shrink for the comfort of cowards. Your pain taught you that, and maybe that's what scares them now, that the same person they tried to destroy is no longer breakable, no longer desperate, no longer accessible in the way you used to be. Maybe they're starting to realize that they didn't just lose the old you, they activated the real you. Because the truth is, the most powerful people are often the ones who were once in pieces, the ones who were laughed at when they cried, the ones who were told to get over it when their hearts were shattered, the ones who had no one to lean on but learned to stand anyway. That's you. You are not the same person who was once humiliated, discarded, or devalued. You've changed. And pain was the price, but look what it gave you in return: strength, clarity, boundaries, and the unshakable knowledge that you can survive what you once thought would kill you. They underestimated the power of your pain because they never imagined you would rise. They thought you would stay beneath their feet, quiet and forgotten. But now, your very existence disrupts their comfort. Your presence is a reminder that pain does not end people. It elevates them. You didn't just survive, you absorbed every blow, every insult, every betrayal, and turned it into fire. And now they can't look at you without feeling the heat of everything they once tried to extinguish. You were supposed to be broken, but you became a storm. Their betrayal awakened your authentic self. Betrayal has a way of shattering illusions you never realized you were living inside. It walks into your life wearing the face of love, of friendship, of loyalty, and then slowly peels back the skin to reveal the truth. When they betrayed you, it wasn't just your heart that broke. It was the image you held of them, of yourself, of the world. And though it felt like everything collapsed, something else began to awaken beneath the wreckage. You see, you had spent so long being who they needed you to be. You adjusted. You softened your voice. You kept quiet to keep the peace. You bent so they wouldn't break. You gave them the benefit of the doubt, even when your soul screamed that something wasn't right. Why? Because you wanted to believe in them. You wanted to believe that love was enough, that kindness could change people, that loyalty would be returned. But betrayal ended that dream. And in its painful, soul-shaking place, something far more powerful emerged. The real you. The version of you that was buried beneath guilt and people-pleasing. The version of you that always felt too much, too loud, too emotional, too intense. The version of you that they wanted to dim because it threatened their control. That version, the truest version, began to rise when they walked away. And that's what they never expected. They thought betraying you would destroy you. They believed that once they broke your trust, you'd crumble so deeply that you'd never rise again. But betrayal didn't destroy you. It stripped you. It peeled away everything that wasn't real. The masks, the roles, the lies you told yourself to survive. Do you remember how lost you felt right after it happened? How you stood in front of the mirror, not even recognizing who you were anymore? That emptiness, that grief. It was sacred because it forced you to face yourself. Not the self they liked, not the version that made everyone else comfortable, but the raw, unfiltered you, the one who'd been silenced for far too long. And once you saw that version, you couldn't unsee it. That's when the awakening began. You started saying no without guilt. You stopped apologizing for needing space. You began trusting your instincts, not because you were paranoid, but because pain had sharpened your discernment. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped begging people to stay. And most importantly, you stopped trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Their betrayal didn't just awaken your authentic self. It gave you permission to become it unapologetically, boldly, fiercely. You began to realize that who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your truth, isn't too much. It's powerful. And if it makes people uncomfortable, that's not your burden to carry anymore. The ones who betrayed you tried to paint you as unstable, dramatic, irrational. They needed to rewrite the story to justify their actions. But the truth is, they were terrified of who you might become once you stopped needing their approval. They were afraid that the moment you found yourself, they'd lose control of the narrative. And they were right, because now you walk differently, you speak differently, you see through facades. You don't chase what doesn't chase you. You don't shrink to be accepted. You've tasted betrayal, and instead of turning bitter, you turned honest. Honest about your boundaries, your worth, your needs, and there's no going back. Your authentic self, the one that was born in fire and shaped by pain, is a threat to everything fake. And that's why they stay away now. Not because you're weak, but because you've finally become someone they can no longer manipulate. You were never too much. You were just too real for people who never intended to stay. Your growth is their greatest insecurity. They wanted you to stay broken, not because they said it out loud, not because they openly admitted it, but because they thrived in the version of you that was dependent, quiet, unsure of yourself. They liked you better when you second-guessed your worth, when you looked to them for permission, when your confidence was small enough that it didn't make them feel like less. And then something happened. You started healing, not in grand dramatic ways, but quietly, slowly, secretly. You stopped explaining your every move. You stopped needing their praise. You started to walk with a steadiness that didn't ask for approval. And it was in that shift, not in your words, but in your energy, that they started to feel it. That unsettling, gnawing discomfort every time they looked at you. Because they realized you were no longer the same. You outgrew their version of you. And that, more than anything, shook them. They were fine with you as long as you stayed in the shadows, as long as you kept your head down, your mouth shut, and your light dimmed. But the moment you began to rise, the moment your growth became undeniable, they began to feel exposed. Because your strength started to reflect everything they refused to work on within themselves. You weren't supposed to get better. You weren't supposed to move on, find peace, or walk away from the chaos they created. You were supposed to stay hurt, to keep playing your role in their story. But you didn't. You stopped letting their opinion define you. You stopped participating in the drama, and with every step forward, their sense of control slipped a little more. Have you noticed how distant they've become? How quiet? Not because they're too busy, but because your presence now disturbs the comfort of their denial. Your growth holds up a mirror, one they can't look into without seeing their own stagnation, their own bitterness, their own refusal to change. And the irony? They'll never say it. They'll never admit that your strength makes them insecure. They'll mask it with sarcasm, with avoidance, with dismissive comments meant to make you doubt yourself again. But behind every passive-aggressive remark, every fake laugh, every subtle jab is fear. Fear that you've outgrown them. Fear that your healing proved something they never wanted to believe, that you were never the problem. You didn't grow to compete. You didn't heal to hurt them. You did it because you were tired of bleeding for people who never cared if you healed. You did it because you deserved more than surviving in the same space where you were once wounded. But your growth disrupted the balance, because people who are committed to staying broken will always feel attacked by those who choose to grow. And now you walk into rooms you used to shrink in. You speak truths you used to swallow. You take up space in places where you were once invisible. And without ever intending to, without seeking revenge or recognition, you've become the fire that makes them uncomfortable in their own skin. Because growth, real growth, isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It speaks for itself. You became what they said you'd never be. You healed in places they never thought you could. And now every time they see you, they don't just see you. They see who they could have been if they'd chosen to grow too. You are the mirror they cannot escape. There's a certain type of silence that falls between people, not because there's nothing to say, but because too much truth stands between them. It's the kind of silence that grows heavy when you walk into a room. When they see you now, they avert their eyes, change the subject, or suddenly grow distant. But the tension doesn't come from anything you've said. It comes from everything you've become. You've become a mirror, not the kind that flatters or softens, the kind that reflects people exactly as they are, and that terrifies them. Because when they betrayed you, when they lied, manipulated, mocked, or left you bleeding while they smiled, you were supposed to stay small. That was the unspoken rule. You weren't supposed to evolve into someone powerful. You weren't supposed to become someone with clarity, with boundaries, with self-respect. And yet here you are, living proof that their version of you was a lie. And now, when they see you, they see themselves. Unfiltered, exposed. Every time you walk in with your head high, you confront the part of them that can't even look in the mirror without guilt. Every time you speak your truth, their silence grows heavier. Every time you grow, their excuses shrink, because you've become the embodiment of everything they suppressed in themselves. Honesty, healing, wholeness. And your very existence reminds them of the choices they refuse to make. You're not the problem. You're the reflection. And that's why they're uncomfortable around you now. That's why they call you too much or too intense or dramatic. Not because you are, but because their truth is too loud when they're near you. You don't even have to bring up the past. You don't have to say a word about what they did, because your presence says it all. You survived, you healed, and now the contrast between who you are and who they chose to remain, it burns. You are the mirror they cannot escape. Some of them will try to rewrite history to ease their conscience. They'll say things like, it wasn't that serious, or you were always too sensitive, or you've changed. But the truth is, they see the change, and they know it was forged in fire. What they once saw as weakness has become your greatest strength. And no amount of revision can erase the fact that they weren't there when you needed them, that they chose ego over empathy, that they failed to show up when it mattered most. They don't hate you. They hate what they see when they're around you. because now you stand for everything they avoided. You are the reminder of what they destroyed. You are the reality check that some wounds don't disappear quietly. They become louder with growth. And the more you step into your power, the more exposed they feel in theirs. That's why they can't joke with you the way they used to. That's why their words feel shallow, their presence forced, their compliments empty. Because under every word is the weight of guilt, envy, regret, or all three. You reflect their cowardice, their refusal to change, their fear of doing the hard inner work. And no one likes looking in a mirror that doesn't lie. So they avoid you, they label you, they try to dim you again, this time with silence, with absence, with coldness. But deep down, they know they can't escape what you represent. You were the one they thought would stay broken. But you became the one who woke up. And now they live with the truth that while you were healing, they were hiding. While you were growing, they were blaming. While you were facing every demon alone, they were running from theirs. You didn't ask to become their mirror, but pain shaped you into one. And now, no matter how far they run, how loud they laugh, or how convincing their masks appear, something inside them shifts every time they see your face, because it reflects everything they buried, denied, or destroyed. You didn't ruin the relationship. You revealed what was real. Your fire isn't just survival, it's purpose. There comes a moment when you stop asking why they hurt you, why they lied, why they left, why they couldn't love you the way you deserve to be loved. And instead you start asking something far more important. What now? You see, survival was never the destination. It was just the beginning. For a long time, your only goal was to make it through the day without breaking, to hold your emotions together in public, to pretend you were okay while silently carrying the weight of betrayal, abandonment, and deep disappointment. You smiled while shattered. You stayed kind while being torn apart inside. That wasn't weakness. That was a fire beginning to form quietly, invisibly, deep within your soul. People saw you breathing and assumed you were fine. But they didn't know that every breath was a battle, that every night you got through without falling apart was a silent victory. You survived things that would have destroyed someone else. You endured things that made others cruel, but somehow you stayed soft. You still prayed, you still loved, you still hoped. But here's the truth no one talks about. You weren't meant to just survive, you were meant to rise. And that fire inside you, it didn't come from anger, it came from purpose. Because something changes in a person when they realize that the pain wasn't random, that the betrayals weren't without meaning, that every tear, every insult, every act of cruelty was preparing them for something more. You weren't being punished, you were being prepared for clarity, for resilience, for mission. You've become dangerous now, not because you're vengeful, but because you're awake. You've seen the worst in people and didn't let it turn you into one of them. You've stared down the darkness and walked through it without losing your light. That's power, real power, the kind that doesn't need noise to be felt, the kind that doesn't need revenge to be complete. They thought you would burn out, but they didn't realize that you were never on fire to impress them. You were burning for something far greater, for every soul who's ever felt like you did, for every heart that's been lied to, broken, ignored, for every person who's still crawling through the dark, searching for a reason to keep going. That's your purpose now. You're not just a survivor, you're a carrier of light. And that makes some people uncomfortable because you're not bitter. You're not broken. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. And not just the soft parts, the fierce parts. The parts that don't apologize anymore, the parts that speak up now, the parts that walk away from things that once held you hostage emotionally. You've become the fire that others feel even when you're silent. They sense your strength when you walk in. They hear your truth in your stillness. Your energy has shifted, and now you carry weight, not the weight of pain, but the weight of purpose. And that's why they stay away. That's why they watch from a distance. Because there's something about a person who has turned their pain into purpose that shakes people who are still running from their own. You are a living reminder that survival can become transformation, and that transformation can become a calling. You don't burn to destroy, you burn to awaken. You burn with intention, you burn with meaning. Every word you speak now carries the echo of every moment you were silenced. Every boundary you set now is a monument to the places you were once disrespected. Every step you take now is grounded in the fire that once almost consumed you. And the beauty? You didn't need permission to become this version of yourself. You didn't wait for an apology. You didn't wait for closure. You didn't wait for anyone to say you deserve better. You decided. You claimed it. You lit the match and watched your old self burn, and from those ashes you rose with clarity, conviction, and a mission. Your fire is not rage. It's not pride. It's not revenge. It's purpose. So now you see it clearly, don't you? They didn't break you. They revealed you. They didn't bury you. They planted you in silence, in pain, and rejection, and thought that would be the end. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something they never saw coming, because buried things die, but planted things grow. And you, my friend, have grown into a force they can no longer predict, control, or silence. You became the fire. Not the kind that burns everything in bitterness, but the kind that lights the way for yourself and for others. You turned pain into power. You turned isolation into clarity. You turned betrayal into the spark that ignited your purpose. And now they lie awake at night, not because of what you said, but because of what you've become. You no longer beg. You no longer explain. You no longer dance for their approval. Your growth speaks louder than any revenge ever could. Your presence alone reminds them of what they lost and what they will never get to break again. They underestimated your silence. They misread your fall. They feared your healing. And now they're haunted by your rise. This is your moment to stop dimming your light for the comfort of those who tried to extinguish it. This is your sign to own your story, your scars, your strength, and to walk forward knowing that the people who caused your pain no longer get to define your path. You are not what they did to you. You are what you chose to become in spite of it. So stand tall, not for them to see, but for you to finally breathe. Because the fire that burns in you now is not fueled by revenge. It's fueled by freedom. And that's why they can't sleep. Because you didn't just survive what they did, you turned it into something sacred. They tried to bury you. But now you are the fire that keeps them up at night.